The database query component empowers Matillion ETL users to run SQL queries on an accessible database, getting data into a target table via a staging area in order to perform further processing and transformations. The database query component can be used to query data from a range of widely used databases, including IBM DB2, PostgreSQL, MySQL, and more. In this example, we'll show the setup of the database query component and how to connect to the database of your choice. Then use the component to query a table of flights data, and filter these results by delayed departure time and a specific year. Begin by dragging the database query component onto the canvas of an orchestration job. It can be found under Connectors, Load. You can also search for database query in the search bar. Then navigate to the Properties tab while the component is selected to begin configuring the component. Basic/Advanced mode gives you the option to construct your query in two different ways. With Basic, you construct a query with the data schema, data selection, and data source filter properties to select the source schema, table, and columns to use in a query. The data source filter property can then be used to filter the source data. This option allows you to quickly query data to your requirements without having to write any SQL. With Advanced mode, this requires the user to write an SQL-like query to call the data from their chosen database. This option gives you flexibility to write more complex queries from your source database's SQL standard. For our example, we'll use both Basic and Advanced mode to query a table of flights data. The database query component defaults to Advanced mode. First, we'll create our query using this, then recreate the same query using Basic mode. Database type. Here you select the database you are querying. This includes PostgreSQL, MySQL, Microsoft SQL Server, and all other options mentioned at the start of this video. Note, for some databases, you must first provide a JDBC driver, as not all drivers can be distributed with Matillion ETL. Please consult the Matillion documentation for instructions on managing these drivers. For this example, we'll use a source database type of PostgreSQL. Under Connection URL, this is the JDBC database URL. The format of the URL varies depending on your selected database, and a default template URL is populated. Replace any special tags in the URL template with real values. For example, for PostgreSQL, the host address and database name. How to find the JDBC driver URL varies by database. Information on how to do this can be found on the Matillion documentation site. Under Username and Password, enter the username and password for the database connection. The password is masked so it can be set but not read. Users have the option to store their password inside the component, but we recommend using the Password Manager feature to securely store your passwords. Connection options are additional properties exposed by the database driver, which you may want when querying the database. Parameters and their allowed values are database specific. Under SQL Query, we manually write our SQL. First, to select from the source flights table, then to filter these results by year and delayed departure time. You can use the built-in sample function to test your query and check your data before running the job. When using Advanced mode, any SQL entered into the query should be written to match the SQL language variant for the database. You can use the Metadata Explorer to see the available schemas from your source database, as well as the tables within the selected schema and their columns. We'll write a query to match our selection criteria. We can see we're only selecting flights from 2005 when the departure time is greater than the scheduled departure time. Then we can press the sample button to check the query is doing what we want before we run the job. If everything is correct, click OK. Under Target Table, enter the name you'd like to use for your staging table. The target table should be considered temporary, because it will either be truncated or recreated every time the component runs. Warning, this process is destructive. If the target table undergoes a change in structure, it will be recreated. Otherwise, the target table is truncated. Setting the load option Recreate Target Table to off will prevent both recreation and truncation. Do not modify the target table structure manually. Staging and staging area. Select where your data is to be staged. In this example, we'll be using a Snowflake managed staging area. Other cloud storage can be used if preferred. Opting to use cloud storage will reveal additional properties to configure the staging location. When you've completed all the component properties and the job has validated successfully, we can run the job to load the data to our staging table. Right-click on the canvas and select Run Job. The data has now been loaded to the target staging table, where we can view the loaded data. Now, using basic mode, we'll recreate the same load using the data schema, source, and selection properties. Navigate back to the database query properties and select basic mode from the basic/advanced mode drop-down. You'll notice this will modify the list of available properties, removing the SQL query property and replacing it with the data schema, source, and selection properties. As we're now using basic mode, we'll use these new properties to query our data. Use these to select the source schema, table, and columns to be queried. In this example, we'll navigate to the table of flights data from the PostgreSQL database. Under Data Source Filter, use qualifiers, comparators, and values to filter your data as required. Press the plus button to add a new row. Then from the drop-downs, we'll select where the column year is equal to 2005, the same as the SQL written in advanced mode. Then we'll add a second column where the departure time is greater than the scheduled departure time. Then click OK. Running the job again will recreate our target staging table with our new selection criteria. The data has now been loaded to the target staging table and is ready for transformation using Matillion ETL transformation components. Incremental loads using this component can be built using the JDBC incremental load generator. To get started with Matillion, visit matillion.com.